Professor Chronos, China 2025, The Great Tariff Tango. Greetings, my geopolitically gifted scholars. Professor Chronos here, and today we're diving into what I like to call the world's most expensive economic soap opera, China in 2025, or as future historians will probably title this chapter, How Two Superpowers Turned International Trade into the World's Most Complicated Dance-Off. Now, here's where it gets spicy. Chapter 1. The Tariff Tango begins. Picture this. It's February 1st, 2025, and Donald Trump. Yes, that Donald Trump, back for round 2 of How to Make Trade Wars Great Again, decides to kick off the year with a 10% tariff on imports from China. Because apparently, nothing says Happy New Year like immediately making everything more expensive. But wait, there's more. China, not to be outdone in this economic version of anything you can do, I can do better, immediately fires back with export controls and increased tariffs on American goods by February 3rd. As I always say, nothing resolves international tensions quite like making each other's stuff more expensive. Now, let me paint you a picture of the economic choreography we're witnessing here. U.S. duties on Chinese products are currently set at 30%, while China's tariffs on the U.S. have dropped to a mere 10%. It's like watching two people argue over who gets to pay more for the privilege of trading with each other. Chapter 2. The economic plot thickens. Here's where our story gets absolutely fascinating from a historical perspective. China's economy is still growing at an annual rate of more than 5% in the second quarter, which is like watching someone continue to jog while being pelted with economic snowballs. But don't mind me, but the analysts are getting a bit nervous. Some UBS analysts are predicting that Trump's tariff hikes could reduce China's economic growth rate to just 4% in 2025, which might not sound dramatic to you. But in economist terms, that's like watching your favorite sports team go from winning the championship to just making the playoffs. Now, what makes this particularly spicy is that this 4.5% growth rate is lower than the Chinese government's official target of 5% for 2025. It's like aiming to run a marathon in under 4 hours and realizing halfway through that you might need to settle for 4:15. Still impressive, but not quite what you planned. Chapter 3. The Great Balancing Act. As you can see, international relations in 2025 require better coordination than I possess. Here's what's absolutely mind-boggling about this whole situation. Economic and social strains threaten the social order, while the party state seeks to maintain control amid complex governance issues and rising public discontent. It's like trying to conduct an orchestra where half the musicians are playing different songs and the other half are questioning whether they want to be in the band at all. Meanwhile, China is using expected transatlantic tensions to court Europe while building a coalition of like-minded partners to resist pressure from the U.S. This is basically the international relations equivalent of my parents are fighting, so I'm going to hang out with my cool aunt who gives me candy. Chapter 4. The Environmental Subplot. But wait, there's a whole other layer to this historical lasagna. Despite improved targets, the Climate Action Tracker rates China's domestic emission reduction target as highly insufficient to meet the Paris Agreement goal. So we have China simultaneously dealing with a trade war and trying to figure out how to stop the planet from turning into a giant convection oven. It's like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube while riding a unicycle during an earthquake. I cannot even begin to explain the complexity of managing the world's second-largest economy while navigating international pressure, domestic expectations, and climate change all at the same time. It makes my problems with grading undergraduate papers seem absolutely trivial by comparison. Chapter 5. The Historical Perspective. Now, from a purely academic standpoint, what we're witnessing is absolutely fascinating. We're watching two of the world's largest economies essentially play an extremely expensive game of economic chicken while the rest of the world watches and nervously adjusts their own trade policies. Trump has been cranking up the pressure on America's trading partners, firing off letters to heads of several countries, informing them of their new tariff rates. It's like he's running international trade policy through a combination of Twitter diplomacy and strongly worded postal service. The really wild part? China's manufacturing activity is showing mixed signals, with private surveys showing expansion while official reports show contraction. It's like asking someone, "How are you doing?" and getting two completely different answers depending on who's asking. Chapter 6. The current dance continues. as we speak? Well, as I'm recording this masterpiece of historical analysis, trade talks are ongoing, potentially paving the way for a meeting between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping later in the year. This is the diplomatic equivalent of two people having a very public argument and then agreeing to talk about it over coffee, while everyone watches to see if they'll shake hands or throw pastries at each other. So what are we really witnessing in China in 2025? We're watching a masterclass in how modern superpowers navigate the incredibly complex intersection of economics, politics, and international relations in real time. Future historians, assuming they have time between dealing with whatever chaos 2026 brings, will look back at 2025 as a pivotal year when two economic giants decided to resolve their differences through the time-honored tradition of making trade more expensive and complicated for everyone involved. The thing about balancing acts is that they only work when everyone involved actually wants to keep the plate spinning. Right now, we're watching the most expensive plate spinning performance in human history, and nobody's quite sure if the goal is to keep everything balanced or to see who drops theirs first. As I always say, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does occasionally engage in very costly economic interpretive dance. That's all for today's expedition into contemporary geopolitical theater. If this episode made you want to understand international trade better, I recommend starting with something simpler, like quantum physics or medieval tax law. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Next week, we're going back to safer historical territory and covering the time the Byzantine Empire got into a trade dispute with Venice that lasted 200 years, or maybe not. Because apparently, holding grudges over commercial disagreements is a time-honored human tradition. Professor Chronos, historically and contemporarily yours.